So thanks, Teresa. So my name is Emmanuel Khisa, and I'm the Africa Director for Center for Digital Public Infrastructure.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So tell us, Emmanuel, what does the center do?
So CDPI is a pro bono tech advisory facility housed within IIITB, Bangalore. And what we do is to help countries to design better systems and ensure that DPI is widespread across the world. It's a global South-South initiative. And one of the key areas where we intervene is in sitting with governments and supporting them to design solutions that are open, interoperable, and privacy by design.
What African countries are you working with?
So we currently work with about 7 African countries. Zambia is our lead country in the continent. We also have Uganda, which is closing as a close second. We have Nigeria, Malawi, Namibia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So I've read a little bit about the work that you've done in Zambia. Tell us a little bit about the success there.
Yes. So Zambia was obviously the first country that we tried to engage when the center was moving into Africa. We found an ecosystem that did not have electronic KYC, and we needed to support them. They had great ambitions.
And for people who don't know what KYC is.
Okay. So electronic know your customer is a way to digitally verify the identity of a customer that you're engaging and that you're working with. So,
and that's for a bank.
And it is for a bank primarily, but in Zambia we've had an expanded use case and scope, and so we have one of the digital health platforms using the same electronic KYC platform. We also have the government's social protection fund for the drought victims of the worst drought in Zambia in 100 years. And so that drought intervention program is utilizing this same electronic KYC to help with identification of beneficiaries and also disbursement of the
So I think I cut you off, and that's where you were going with this, explaining to our audience what the benefit of a more sophisticated KYC platform is, the benefit to society is.
Yes. So the benefit of an eKYC is that it sparks innovation. And in a digital sense, because you then are able to build solutions within the ecosystem, including fintech, including insurtech, including edtech, solutions that help to deliver services faster and reliably to the community. One of the obvious financial benefits, for example, for the Zambia ecosystem has been the potential for this to be used for loans application for students who are applying for government scholarship. And so it makes it easier for the government to be able to provide the funding to students in universities primarily, and also in TVET colleges. TVET is technical vocational training centers. Yeah.
So we're talking about electronic KYC, but let's back up just a little bit, because when we're here discussing digital public infrastructure, and that's one important component of it.
Yes.
But if we peel back the layer and just start at the most foundational level for DPI, a country needs to also have strong power and internet before you can even get there.
Yes.
So can you comment in Zambia, did you already find that foundation in place?
So we did, and it's interesting that you mentioned this. I think it takes us back to the whole philosophical conversation around DPI and what to do when you're looking at how best to what are the prerequisites for a successful deployment. Um, and the irony is that Zambia has actually had their worst drought in 100 years, by extension, because their power generation is hydro. They've also then had to contend with serious number of hours in a day of blackout, and then you load on top of that impact of the drought and power outage on connectivity, and you have a real case for DPI not to work, right? But in the same sense, I think the intentionality behind it, the drive behind it, has meant one of the things that's happened is we've had sort of a country that is so committed against all odds to make tech work. So, for example, they very earlier on the continent adopted Starlink. Right after Nigeria, it was Zambia that took on Starlink and made sure that there's coverage across the country. They have some incredible government-driven infrastructure solutions. One is called Infratel, which is the telecoms company that has towers across the country. The widest spread of towers in Zambia is actually driven from the government owned Infratel, which runs as a separate entity subsidiary. And on the power side, they've had to prioritize some of those critical service areas. So there's been very minimal disruption. And then to sort of mitigate against all that power problem, they've had to partner with China, of course, to do very large scale, solar intervention for the country. And so solar for the first time has been brought on board and has been, made available as wide as possible within the country, which is a great learning for them. So these are not DPI questions, but they are obviously sort of, to say, a very intentional approach to making sure that you're actually delivering for your DPI needs, which will require power, and they'll require internet, and they'll require stability of the same. So to that extent, yes, one of the philosophical elements is that DPI requires connectivity to thrive. But beyond that philosophical element, I think DPI also requires political will and drive to thrive. So the success is, yes, there's the infrastructure, the physical rails that it runs upon, but it's also the powerful political statement of champions that push the DPI agenda.
I want to follow up with one of the comments you made about connectivity.
Yeah.
Do you have a view that we can achieve these DPI objectives over wireless, or do you think that we have to have broadband cable in order to have the speeds necessary to achieve the objectives?
I think the evidence actually points to possibilities of wireless being what you need. So, at the risk of being too Zambia centric, it's a vast country with sparse population. Start there. There is Tanzania as well, vast country. Again, very concentrated population centers to the contrary. And many other countries that have had to adopt, wireless. Starlink has demonstrated much higher speeds than most of the fiber connectivity solutions that are available within most metro fiber ecosystems in the continent. And so I do believe that the wireless wired gap is narrowing. We are starting to see just as good decent speeds on wireless as we have had on fiber in the metros. So this is to my mind, I think it's possible. The other, sort of elements around it. I mean, issues around access, which to my mind comes down to cost, comes down to elements around technology applied to access. So are you using USSD, for example? Is the technology appropriate for the context that you're working with? Or is the technology more driven by the smartphone type applications? And what I would say there is that we still have to figure out the need to have appropriate tech for this population. So where you have feature phone access, for example, it allows you to drive some of this adoption at a very low level in the rural areas, where you not only have low connectivity rates, but you also have low access to smartphone devices. So I think the smart devices could be a distraction, the overemphasis on the same, because you may not then get to a level and scale that you may want. But if you can build DPI technologies that still, work on USSD or work on a simple feature phone, as was the case with mobile money, for example, which is scalable and appropriate, even where you apply assisted tech, for the communities. Those are some of the thought processes that I think on the Africa side, it's nuanced. I saw one of the questions that people had was what is the difference, between Africa and India in that instance? And I think at the risk of preempting it, I think there's a possibility, to oversimplify the comparisons between the two areas. But two main ones, I think, the fact that in India, it's one country. In Africa, you're dealing with 54 different countries, 40 different currencies, and you're also dealing with a not so widespread, cheap access to smartphone and towers and internet, when in India already they had free calls by certain points in their DPI journey. Yeah.
I have so many questions for you. You've said so many. Your comments are so rich, and we're so privileged to speak with you today. Coming back to this question around the essentials of power and connectivity, do you think that it makes sense for African governments to be thinking about various applications before they have achieved the goals that they need to achieve relative to power and connectivity? In other words, does it need to be sequenced? Should another investment be made in the applications before investments are made in advancing power and connectivity? Do you have to get power and connectivity in place first?
So, it depends on how you perceive it. And I think it's interesting because in the African context, there's the view we hold, or many people hold, that, oh my God, vast parts of this continent are not covered. Okay? But from a GSMA study, I think the question should be framed differently. There's the coverage gap, usage gap, and access gap. And so if you think about it from a coverage gap standpoint, the gap has pretty much narrowed in many ways, whereby for most part, many countries already have the dark spots have reduced. I mean, the spaces without any connectivity at all. Then that leaves you with usage, which is a factor of cost and affordability, and access, which is a factor of device or lack thereof of devices. And so I think that the most important elements for us to consider is to almost scale the stairs and chew gum at the same time for most of these countries, because it's a case of you can't be left behind. You can't have your young people growing up in a space and environment that doesn't empower and provide tech for them. But at the same time, you can't be in an environment that is in the dark, so without power. So it's almost an imperative. I think it also creates that sense of urgency is helpful, because it creates it breeds creativity. The necessity of it breeds creativity, so much so that as you set up your power infrastructure, you need to combine it with fiber that runs along that power line, so that as you're reaching the homes, you're actually delivering a triple or dual play. So you're either landing in electricity and fiber for internet, but you could also be landing educational content. So you're landing so much more. And if you think about how we have evolved through the 90s into the new millennia and all these things, you then almost start to think and feel that we leapfrogged the whole telephone, wired telephony era, and just jumped, and all of a sudden about 400 million Africans then got to be connected on telephone, when previously you had maybe less than 5 million telephones in homes, right? So I think that there's a possibility there that whereas, yes, we do not have access in many ways to electricity, or the electricity access is unstable, these provide opportunities. They provide opportunities for smarter devices that use solar to charge them, and smarter devices that allow for homes to be wired and connected, through solar powered lighting, or schools to be connected through solar powered lighting. And all these opportunities then present more scope, faster speed to access. Yeah.
Another question from something you said. You'd mentioned how we mustn't be distracted by the lack of access to smartphones, and that there's a fair bit you can do without them, with just feature phones.
Yeah.
And you gave a very good example of mobile money, which started in your home country in Kenya with M-Pesa.
Yes.
Can you give some other examples of applications that one can use on feature phones without having the need to have a smartphone? Because that's a very effective one that you mentioned.
Yeah, so I think that there's been the power of financial services. I think DFS is one area that we've witnessed lots of access and transformation from, even if you discount for mobile money, I mean, even just mobile banking, where interaction between the bank and the customer, issues on two-factor authentication, where you can still implement security features of various applications and services using any type of phone. If you look at ag, which is another space where applications can be accessed using USSD, and so by dialing a short code, you're able to receive either information or closest agrovet, or share information about your harvest and how much you have available for sale for the market, and so on and so forth. So there's lots of innovation that is still possible to be implemented using feature phones and USSD sort of low level tech. I think I'm not saying that there's no use in place for smartphones and all that stuff, but I think the the notion that you need all of these things before you get started then means that, oh, let's just wait, or let's look for $50 billion master plan to get Africa having the devices that they need to then move forward, which I think is problematic, because we also discount for all these possibilities that we may be dealing with literacy levels that are still low. You're dealing with much more enhanced power needs. You're dealing with much more enhanced connectivity needs, because all the smartphones come with their own demand and drain on data. And you then extrapolate it to cost, and the costs are just way out of reach for the average person trying to balance between the $2 for food and maybe $3 or $4 for 1,000 MB of data. So it's
I like what you're saying, which is another way of saying, don't let great be the enemy of good.
Yes.
If we could do some good,
do it.
If
we can get started. I mean, if the digital financial sector, focused on, oh my God, we have to have Java enabled phones before we do anything, then we would never have moved the needle on access to financial services. So
let's talk a little bit about African empowerment in terms of this whole DPI movement. I think you have some interesting thoughts there. Can you share some thoughts?
Yeah. So thanks for that. I think the reality we have here is that nobody's coming to save Africa in a sense. I think we are in a very interesting time as a continent where I think belief in self, belief in our own abilities to have answers to our problems, and from mobile money's rise, we can see that, okay, the continent needed solution. We know as a continent what solutions would work for us. We know where the shoe pinches, in a sense. So my view is that we need to continuously build tech and DPI that responds to our needs. My dream is to see more and more of our young entrepreneurs, young developers building solutions for this continent with their context in mind, because someone from outside may never have the context that we are even dealing with access issues or connectivity issues. They may be building with the assumption that all that is sorted out, so take this solution or leave it. But we have an opportunity to build based on that local understanding, local wiring, local ability to say, if I have to walk to school, how can I build a solution that helps that child who's walking to school, be safe as they walk to school, and also to be able to alert the village in case of danger. Such kind of solutions only come from your own understanding of the reality on the ground. And I think my hope is for the continent that we begin to have that belief in ourselves, believe that we can do it.
One last question for you. As a Kenyan,
yes,
Kenya has often been considered the Silicon Savannah of Africa. We've talked about what's happening in other countries. Tell us a little bit about where you see DPI in Kenya, because we know that there's a lot of development there, a lot of entrepreneurial activity, a lot of high-tech skills. Where is Kenya in all of this?
Wow, Teresa. I think it's Kenya's had good leadership in tech, but I think that's been taken for granted. I think that it's almost digressed to my mind, because there's a sense to which talent exists, and there's great talent, but there is a gap in leadership. Remember what I talked about, the role of leadership in driving forward adoption and even scale of DPI. You need leadership, and I think there is a sense to which Kenya in the space we are in at the moment, as DPI is taking off, we are not getting the leadership in the right spaces, that can then help us to navigate, can help the younger people to build solutions. So I attended a very illuminating hackathon 2 months back, and I was quite impressed. I'd become very discouraged that, oh my God, where's all this talent? Where did it go? And the young people were very switched on. I was so impressed by the technology, the solutions that was coming out. But then I said, there's a gap, because there can't be this many solutions that are being brought forth by these young people. I mean, it was a hackathon that, they were supposed to build something in 24, actually, no, about just over 24 hours, maybe 36 hours. And they came up with some really, really solid solution. Needless to say, they were more oriented around civic engagement and all that. But I was quite impressed at their speed, at how many they were. They were, I mean, this hackathon, I mean, we didn't expect more than 50, but there was, I think, 90 enrollments that came through from the developer community. And I said, this is impressive, just needs to be harnessed. And if I cast my mind at the time when the leadership that Kenya provided on tech and all these things existed, I think there was a great sense to which political will, political leadership at ministerial levels were very much switched on. I mean, there's a change of guard now, and our hope is they probably will take a bit more forward-looking approach to harness all this talent that exists within the country, for greater good.
Emmanuel, thank you so much. You are clearly one of the continent's leaders in this space, and it's our privilege to be able to sit down and speak with you and learn about your views on DPI in Africa today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.